The tales are true. When you're about to die, life really does flash before your eyes. As I tumbled down the stairs of the Hotel Monte Vista, my world slowed, like I was in a dream, and I saw the terrible events that led me here. Flash. At 18, I told my unrequited love, Lottie, that I couldn't run away with her. She ran anyway. Flash. Decades later, Lottie invited me to Flagstaff, where she's the caretaker of a very haunted hotel. Flash. Lottie told me about her first night, when she was trapped by angry ghosts. She vowed to help them cross over, but not every spirit wanted her aid. Flash. My heart raced as Lottie stopped her story on a cliffhanger and seduced me. Flash. Lottie asked me to write a movie about her because she was broke and needed to promote her hotel. Flash. I called her an opportunist and refused to help her, and she pushed me down the stairs. Once again, I fell for Lottie, but not in a fun way. As I hit one stair after another, I felt my muscles bruise and my bones fracture. There was no use in fighting. My skull was on a collision course with the marble floor, and then it would be lights out forever. I closed my eyes until I realized I hadn't hit the ground. I was hovering in midair. I opened my eyes and gasped. Hands lifted me up, ghostly limbs that flickered in and out of reality. The spirits of the Monte Vista crowded around me. And the last thing I heard before I passed out was their weary supplication. Help us. Please. You're listening to Run Fool. I'm Rodney Barnes, and this is episode 27, Hotel Monte Vista, Part 2. I woke up in the hotel basement. It looked like a dungeon in a horror movie with creaking pipes, cobwebs, and rats scuttling around like they owned the place. To my shock, the fall hadn't left me a paralyzed pulp. I'd broken some ribs and fractured my foot, but I could still pull myself to a stand. Of course, I fell right back down when an eerie wind blew. Whispers echoed, and they appeared. Hazy figures floated down a dark hall toward me. A man in a bloody butcher's coat, a priest holding a baby, a couple with gunshot wounds in their heads, and more spirits crowded behind them. I asked where Lottie was, and one floated forth to crouch by me. She's up there, crying. She feels guilty about pushing you, but trust me, the shame won't last, and she'll kill you if she finds out you're alive. We don't have much time. I eyed his red jacket, his brass buttons, a young face and tired blue eyes that radiated pain. It came to me. You're Teddy, the bellboy, right? He was the ghost Lottie tried to help, and yet here he was today. So I had to know. What happened? What made Lottie like this? Why didn't she help you cross over? Teddy shook his head.
She meant to, but it all went terribly wrong.
Then he rushed at me. No, into me. My eyes clouded over, and I saw the rest of Lottie's story. Back in 1992, the basement was flooded with a foot of dirty water. Not the kind of thing you wanted to step in. So imagine how Lottie felt with her face down, drowning in it. She coughed and choked, praying for enough air to scream. Every time she lifted her head, she heard cackles before she was rammed back into the muck. Millie and Delilah, the flapper spirits from room 222, were dead set on making her the hotel's next ghost. They dominated her with spectral force, like the weighted blanket from hell. Lottie felt a vice-like grip on her neck. They've gotten stronger, she thought, preparing for the end. But the hands lifted her up instead. Crothers, the hotel's cantankerous caretaker, pulled her to safety. Lottie looked around for her attackers, wild-eyed, but all she heard were giggles receding from down the dark hall. Lottie hugged Crothers, but he gagged and pushed her to the stairs. Shaking filthy water off his hands, he grumbled. If you wanted to swim, the hotel's got a pool. An hour later, Lottie dried her hair with a towel and walked into the lobby. Even after a scalding shower, she couldn't shake the stench of the basement. She saw Crothers by the desk and caught him up on what she'd learned so far. Okay, we've got Teddy the bellboy. He killed himself in 1932 because of a mysterious tragedy, and his ghost can only repeat the phrase, "Good hard work deserves a nice big tip," which feels like a clue, but I'm not sure how. Then there's Millie and Delilah, prostitutes who stole an abusive client's money and hid in room 222. The client who somehow got in and threw them out of the window. They want to stop me from helping Teddy, so I think they were involved in his death. Lottie leaned on the desk to catch her breath. Then she cocked her head. Crothers, why do you have my stuff? He pushed a duffel bag into her hands. "'Cause it's time for you to go, missy." He backed Lottie toward the door. She expected the old grump to rant at her, but his brown eyes crinkled sadly. "You're the only one who's shown me kindness in a long time. Not like other guests who think I'm just part of the freak show. And not like the schmucks at City Hall who turn their heads and bury every bit of evidence about the horrible things happening here. I needed your help, but you're too young, pretty, and annoying to croak, missy. I manage to make sure people walk in and out of their hotel alive. So I'll help Teddy, and I'll throw in a full refund for your stay." Crothers pulled out a wad of cash. On instinct, Lottie grabbed it. Hey, money's money. Then she protested. "I can't leave, remember? The door's all slammed shut and I don't think they'll open until I'm done." But then, the lobby doors did swing open. Teddy faded into view, hovering by them. He said what he always did.
"Good hard work deserves a nice tip, ma'am."
But his tone and his eyes were full of emotion, regret, or maybe relief. Before Lottie could comfort him, the hotel door slammed in her face. She looked up and saw the flapper staring out of the window of room 220, smiling and victorious. She stormed off, thinking it was too bad they were already dead. She'd love to throw them out of that damn window herself. Lottie wandered through Flagstaff, lugging her bag and roasting in the afternoon sun. She was pissed off, but she kept telling herself, this was fine. Great even. Why the hell should she risk her one precious life to help the dead? She grinned. With Crothers' cash, she could rent a sexy convertible, keep her road trip revving in style. Maybe she'd head down Route 66 to visit her old pal Rodney, who she heard was in L.A. She'd show up out of the blue, brag about seeing real ghosts, and watch him die of jealousy. When Lottie tried to walk off, though, she couldn't move. She worried it was a supernatural trap, but she was just having a crisis of conscience. Maybe her first. People always accused her of being selfish, of running when things got tough and chasing the next adventure, consequences be damned. They weren't wrong. But here was a hotel, full of souls, living and dead, who couldn't run, who were trapped. That would be hell for Lottie, and it made her determined to set them free. She glimpsed an Arizona flag waving by a building, Flagstaff City Hall. She recalled what Crothers had said about authorities burying information about the hotel. Well, maybe it was time to dig up a grave. The City Hall records room felt deader than the Monte Vista. An old woman in glasses manned the desk, looking so faded that Lottie suspected she was a ghost too. Lottie flashed a megawatt smile and told her she was a journalism student. She'd come to Flagstaff to write her thesis about the Hotel Monte Vista. Articles, police reports, land deeds, anything would help. The attendant was shocked. Lottie felt the sting of guilt until she clarified. "I'm shocked that your thesis is worth so little." She nodded at Lottie's bag. The zipper was open and the rest of the cash was visible. Lottie wanted to kick herself. Now she definitely couldn't skip town because she was about to be penniless. Being a good person sucked. But she handed the rest of the cash over, and the woman said to follow her. In a musty room that was more of a broom closet, Lottie plinked away on a finicky computer looking up the location of yellowing files in a busted cabinet. She wished she had gone to college. Research would be way easier if she'd ever learned to do it right. But Lottie was adaptable, and she got the hang of it. By cross-referencing Teddy with Millie and Delilah, she found police reports, mostly rehashing the girls' grisly murders and Teddy's suicide, which happened 2 weeks later. It made Lottie wonder if the tragedies weren't linked, until she read something that made her break into a cold sweat. An addendum to the confession from the man who killed the girls made years later. Teddy and the Flappers were connected, but not in the way Lottie thought. She'd been so wrong, and she had to get back to the hotel to make things right. The sun set as Lottie ran to the lobby doors. They were locked again, and there was no time to figure out how to bust the lock. Using the duffel bag to shield her face, Lottie charged and crashed through the glass onto the marble floor. Scrambling up, she assessed herself. A few scratches, but she was otherwise okay. She couldn't say the same for the lobby. It was a war zone. Broken furniture, strobing chandeliers, shattered glass. Sure signs that the twins had gone on a rampage. Lottie heard screams from the second floor and raced upstairs, stumbling into room 222. Millie and Delilah flew around the room like crazed banshees. They weren't laughing anymore. They were screeching with rage. Crothers stood in a corner, his shirt and face black and blue. Still, he tried to stand tall, protecting Teddy, who cowered behind him on the ground. The ghost gripped his knees, rocking and whispering his motto.
Good hard work deserves a nice big tip.
When he saw Lottie, Crothers was so relieved he forgot to be mad. Lottie, distract these two and get them out of the room. I don't know if you can kill a ghost, but I reckon they want Teddy even deader than he is now. Lottie turned to face Millie and Delilah and said, Good. The ghost stopped screaming, curious at the righteous anger in her eyes. Lottie turned to glare at Teddy. The bastard deserves it. Crothers told Lottie she wasn't making sense. Teddy was the innocent. Lottie shook her head and said he wasn't what he seemed. Neither were the Flappers. She turned to Millie and Delilah. Show us your truth, please. The Flappers looked at each other, scared but tentative. Then they rushed at Lottie and Crothers. The world went white, just like when Teddy showed Lottie glimpses of his past. Now she saw both sides of what happened on that fateful night in 1932. Teddy leaned over the lobby desk, sweating in his scratchy jacket. It was the graveyard shift, and the rest of the staff left him in charge while they snuck off from mischief and moonshine. He was sure he'd die of boredom any second now. He was about to fall asleep when two gorgeous twins stumbled in, toting a black leather bag. He recognized them as Millie and Delilah. In the era's lingo, they were good time gals, popular and loud, boldly flirty, always claiming they'd get famous even though they couldn't afford to hop a train to L.A. Tonight their cheer had a jagged edge. Millie had a black eye she'd covered with powder, and Delilah's sparkly dress was torn at the shoulder. Teddy wondered if a client had roughed them up, but that wasn't his business. The girls' giggles felt counterfeit, but the $10 they slid across the desk wasn't. Teddy put his hand out to take the bag from Millie, but she pulled away, fearful. Delilah nudged her. Act normal. Millie composed herself and handed him the bag. Attempting to be suave, Teddy said,
Right this way, ladies.
And he led them to room 222. As they climbed the stairs, Teddy felt his arm ache. The bag was heavy, so he glanced down. The zipper was open, just a crack, and he spied the faces of dead presidents peering out at him. More cash than he'd ever held in his life. When they got to the room, Teddy set the bag down to unlock the door. He leaned to pick up the bag again, but Millie grabbed it first. She caressed his cheek and asked his name. When he told her, she said, Teddy, no matter who comes a-calling, don't tell them where we are. You can do that, can't you, sweetums? She fluttered her doe eyes, but that wasn't enough for Teddy. He smiled, then said,
Good hard work deserves a nice tip, ma'am.
The girls looked at one another. Teddy didn't know it, but this wasn't a simple decision. The twins might have to skip town, and this money would have to last them a long time. So Delilah reached into her cleavage and pulled out one measly penny. She tossed it at Teddy and winked. The girls hurried into the room and shut the door in his face. He went back to the lobby, gripping the coin so tight that it cut into his palm. He made pennies, and those two wouldn't share the wealth after he did them such a favor? He felt trapped at the Monte Vista, serving jerks who saw him as subhuman. Teddy wasn't thinking right. So when a disheveled man with nail scratches across his cheeks staggered in and asked if he'd seen some troublemaking twins, Teddy thought, screw 'em, and pointed upstairs.
Room 222.
Then he stepped outside for a smoke. On the curb, Teddy took a drag and exhaled, watching the smoke waft into the night like a hazy ghost. He smiled, forgetting all about the twins, until he heard glass shatter a button. Bodies hurtled down to the curb with a sick, wet crunch. Millie to his left, Delilah to his right. Teddy dropped his cigarette, too stunned to scream. He just stared at their pretty, bloody faces, studded with shards of glass. Their mangled bodies heaved with the last breaths they'd ever take. 2 weeks later, Teddy hung himself. He wanted an escape, but the guilt of dooming the twins trapped him at the Monte Vista forever. When Lottie and Crothers opened their eyes, they were back in 222, staring out of the second-story window where Millie and Delilah had met their end. There was no sign of the twins, but Teddy blocked the doorway. He flickered in and out of reality. Tears flowed from his eyes and his pale cheeks were red with shame. Seething, he muttered between clenched teeth,
Good hard work deserves a nice big tip.
Lottie scoffed. BS excuse, Teddy. You pretended to be sweet and helpful, but you were only in it for yourself. And that got the twins killed. Don't pretend you're not a monster, 'cause I see right through you. Teddy barreled towards Lottie, but Crothers shielded her. Teddy whooshed into Crothers. They struggled. Then Lottie screamed as both men crashed through the window. Moments later, Lottie ran out to the sidewalk. A crowd had gathered, but all she cared about was Crothers, who lay in a pool of glass and blood, limbs splayed in unnatural ways. She knelt, shrieking as glass cut into her knees. A jagged shard of the window was lodged in the caretaker's neck. From the blood soaking in his shirt, Lottie knew he'd bled out. It was too late. Then, Crothers let out a raspy breath. Lottie felt a surge of hope when he opened his eyes, but it turned to terror when she saw his eyes weren't the usual brown. They were blue, like Teddy's. Crothers smiled, blood bubbling between his teeth. Possessed by Teddy's spirit, his arm shot out to grip Lottie's throat. He spat blood in her face.
Got a tip for you, doll. Shoulda kept running like you always do.
He squeezed tight, and Lottie's vision blurred. She saw stars and patterns in the sky, blinding, white-hot shining lights. She knew it was the end, until she heard an onlooker cry, "What are those lights?" It wasn't just in her head. 2 shining balls of energy floated down from room 222. Lottie recognized the sound of giggles in the air when the lights shot into Crothers. He let go of Lottie's throat, and she was thrown to the side. Crothers' body levitated, thrashing and writhing. He kicked and punched at himself like there was a war within him. Then he went slack and crashed down onto the ground. 3 spectral forms erupted from his corpse: Teddy, Millie, and Delilah. The fight wasn't over because the flappers punched and kicked at the screaming bellboy. Lottie had to admit it was satisfying to watch, but it wasn't getting them anywhere. She ran over and barked at him. "Teddy, stop this insanity and apologize. That's the business that's keeping all of you here. You have to make nice if you want to be free." Teddy looked up at Millie and Delilah and burst into tears.
I'm sorry, all right? I wanted you punished, but I didn't know he'd kill you, I swear.
There was a dead silence, and Lottie held her breath. Millie and Delilah looked at each other, then spoke. "Thanks, sweetie, but we do not accept." Teddy's face fell, but the twins glowed with angelic light. The crowd around them gasped in wonder. Lottie saw the other ghosts at the window staring at Millie and Delilah with hope. Yes, even the bloody butcher in room 220. The flappers' bloody faces lit up with smiles. Now that they'd gotten justice, they were crossing over. They winked at Lottie, then shot up to the heavens, giggling all the way. Lottie walked through the destroyed lobby. Teddy trailed after her, sullen. She was in no mood to coddle him. Look, Teddy, it sucks to be you, but there are other ghosts here who are hurting, other wrongs to make right. Maybe if you put in some actual good hard work and help me, your suffering will end. Someday. Teddy thought about it. He was just about to accept when an excited crowd burst into the hotel. Teddy faded from sight and Lottie was attacked with questions about what just happened. She felt overwhelmed. She was battered and bruised, and the anxiety got worse when she remembered. She had no car, no money, no plan. Lottie felt cornered, and her darker instincts took over. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened here was the scariest thing I've ever experienced. But there's more horror where that came from, like the butcher in room 220. I promise I'll tell you all about it, if you pay to stay the night. Back in the basement, Teddy finished his story and shook his head. Lottie promised us she'd do both, make money and help us solve our unfinished business. But business started booming, and you can't make bank off a haunted hotel if all the ghosts have crossed over. So she stopped caring about us. Teddy looked away, teary-eyed. A ghost floated over to lay an arm on Teddy's shoulder. From his wrinkled, crabby face, I knew it was Crothers. I guess 30 years of being trapped together had softened any enmity between them. Crothers looked at me. See, Lottie's our unfinished business now. The thing that's trapping us here. We're tired of haunting Rodney. We're tired of this sorry excuse for an afterlife. So we need your help to get her out. I protested. I was injured and scared, and Lottie wanted me dead. Crothers shook his head. Tough lover, boy. If you can't get rid of her, we'll kill her. I limped into the lobby, burdened with awful purpose. I heard crying and saw Lottie lying at the top of the staircase. I called her name and she sat up. She squinted as I climbed to her, then asked if I was a ghost. With some satisfaction, I told her no. I thought she'd be mad, but Lottie stood up and hugged me tight. She apologized for losing her way, for losing her mind too. I thought about telling her I didn't accept it, like the flappers did to Teddy. I also thought about pushing her down the stairs, but I didn't. See, sometimes the people you care about aren't who you thought they were. The folks you want to help don't deserve it. But you know what I think? You still try to help anyway. I guided Lottie downstairs, promising that I'd tell her story. We'd make a great movie or show. Her hotel would be flooded with guests, and she wouldn't ever have to worry again. She just had to come with me. We'd go somewhere quiet, have coffee, and start writing. I didn't even really believe what I was saying. But Lottie did. We made it out to my car just as dawn broke. I opened the door and Lottie was about to get in when her eyes jerked up. I followed her gaze to the hotel windows. The ghosts stared down from their rooms, thrilled to see her go. She shot me a look of betrayal, then ran back to the hotel. I thought about grabbing her hand, but in the end, I stopped myself. You can help someone who doesn't deserve help, but you can't help someone who doesn't want help. So I watched Lottie rush in. I saw the door slam shut. And when the screaming started, I drove away from the Hotel Monte Vista. I don't know if Lottie lived or died. In the few years since our fateful reunion, I've told myself over and over, move on, Rodney. She's a ghost from the past. You're over her. But I guess that's not true. I did end up writing this story after all, and I'm telling it to you now. So Lottie got what she wanted, as usual. Dead or alive, I hope she hears this. I hope I did right by her, showing how terrible she was and how wonderful she could be. I hope it brings peace to her restless heart so Lottie can move on. And I hope someday I can move on too. Run Fool is a production of Ballen Studios, Campside Media, and At Will Media. It is hosted and executive produced by me, Rodney Barnes. This episode was written by Amin Osman and produced by Abakar Adan and Lee Mengistu. Editing by Abakar Adan. It was sound designed and mixed by Greg Devins II. Sound director, designer, and mixer is Kevin Seaman. Creature vocalization by Terry Cashburn and Colette Anderson. And artwork by Jessica Clarkston Kiner. Production support by Jeremy Bone and Cole Lacasio. Special thanks to our operations team, Doug Slaywin, Ashley Warren, Sabina Mara, and Destiny Dingle. Executive producers at Ballen Studios are MrBallen, Nick Witters, and Zach Levitt. Executive producers at Will Media are Will Malnati and Rosie Guerin. Executive producers at Campside Media are Matt Scher, Josh Dean, Vanessa Gregoriadis, and Adam Hall. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.